Time for the Capitol Report with Pat McGuigan of CapitolBeatOK.com. Pat, lots to talk about this week. Let's talk about the Republican National Convention. Start with Tuesday night and Ann Romney's speech. Coming off of that speech, what impact do you think the candidate spouses will have on the race?
Interesting question. And you know, eventually we're going to accept that they have an impact. And they always have, the wives in the future, maybe the husbands of presidents. And eventually it won't be something, you know, we try to overanalyze too much. Because if you stop and think about it in the modern era, we almost have to stop talking about traditional first ladies, don't we? Because we've seen that model, but all the way back to Eleanor Roosevelt. You know, you've had very assertive and involved on the policy side people. And then there were other folks, other women who were involved in different ways than an Eleanor Roosevelt, who was absolutely on policy issues a partner. Think back to Rosalyn Carter, think back to Betty Ford, and Nancy Reagan, who of course most of her involvement was behind the scenes, but it was very clear from early in Reagan's presidency that it was very powerful. Barbara Bush, Laura Bush, both in different ways very involved and engaged, and of course Hillary Clinton and Michelle Obama, the current occupant of that position. So it's an informal position, but the old expression among historians is the last one to whisper in the monarch's ear at night is a very important person, and that remains the case. And to get back to the specifics, Michelle Obama will be an important player in this campaign, and Ann Romney absolutely knocked it out of the ballpark. It was a gracious, beautiful speech in many ways, and it was intriguing, and you don't know how much of this was thought through or if it's just an extension of who she is, presumably a little bit of both. But for the wife of the conservative Republican nominee to make the subject of her speech love, it's the kind of thing Americans kind of want to hear these days. Kinder, gentler, if you will, and at the same time very effectively delivered. I thought it was magnificent, and it's a preview, no doubt, of what's to come.
So what actual pull, though, will she and Michelle Obama have with voters?
I think they'll have some. I think the voters look at the candidate, but then they look at who's around them. As you remember from the past, sometimes a campaign manager or an aide can become a big issue. Right. Sometimes a spouse can become an issue. I think in both of these cases, the spouses will be pluses for both candidates. So the real question becomes Obama versus Romney.
Okay. All right. The convention itself, how did it pull together? Did it pull together the Republican base?
I'd say, I think that 90% of what they needed to achieve was achieved. So you might give them an A- or a B+, depending on whether you use a traditional grading system or the 10 points at a time. The Ron Paul element, some I think are united behind the candidate and some aren't, frankly, and that's going to be a concern for the future. You're seeing that play out in states like Iowa, where the Libertarians did get a ballot line, and in Oklahoma, where the ballot line was taken away from Americans elect. As long as the party cuts taxes, reduces spending, and avoids foreign entanglements, they'll make the Ron Paul people happy. Now, I'm chuckling because that's hard to do in the modern era, those three things, or any one of them, let alone all three. It's going to be tough, but not impossible.
All right, in our remaining time, your thoughts on candidate Romney's speech and then on Paul Ryan's speech.
I thought Romney's speech was authentic, disarming, personal. These are the kinds of words I've written down. Measured, disciplined. It was very disciplined, and yet it was reflective. I think he was sharing his heart. They said, and I kind of tend to believe it, that he actually wrote a lot of that, and he keeps a diary like Reagan used to, apparently, and distilled a lot of his impressions from the campaign into what we saw. It was not the speech the pundits expected, but the pundits don't matter. What matters is the voters. And I'm sure there was even some data behind how the Romney people decided to approach the speech. It was a good speech for what he needed to do.
Paul Ryan?
Ryan hit a home run, and the sign that he hit a home run in terms of attitude and posture and, you know, doing what vice presidents do. He's the attack dog, just like Biden is on the other side. He did that. And then the sign that it was effective was how quickly they were parsing every single sentence, to the point that, okay, maybe some of his stuff was shaky if you go, you know, if you go War and Peace type level of analysis. But on the other hand, it was a blunt distillation of the Republican case against President Obama, and the sign of its effectiveness is how the nitpicking began immediately, and it's still going on, but people are still giving Paul Ryan pretty high grade for the speech.
You can read more about these and other topics at CapitolBeatOK.com.
Want to talk about the Democrats next week?
You will do that. For Pat McGuigan, I'm Alex Cameron.